Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we are here live in Professional Audio Consultants in Millburn, New Jersey. Thank you, Ralph Tarnofsky, for giving us this beautiful venue here. Ralph will come on a little bit later and tell you a quick thing about his facility here. And I want to thank National NORML for endorsing this event, Colorado NORML, L.E.A.P, for those of you who don't know it, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. We have flyers here tonight. You Be Happy Too, who helps us with all of our web development. She did Lenny's website and the Colorado NORML website and some others. Of course, Ralph here, Pro Audio, Canna Savers, and you'll have to go on our website. It has a link to what they do. And the, this printout doesn't have our vaporizer sponsor, but I am going to get that. Lenny, what's the name of the vaporizer sponsor?
You mean vaporized?
I'll get the accurate name and we will get them their plug properly. Alrighty, let me introduce Lenny Frieling, who just flew in today from Boulder, Colorado, to hopefully tell us what we're doing wrong.
I flew out of Denver this morning from the free state of Colorado, and it is sad.
It's Linda on, saying she can't hear you.
Okay, we have an audio issue, and we're going to solve it before we go further. We're getting a call from Colorado. If they can't hear us from Colorado, let's just make sure we're being heard. And if we don't get heard outside of this room, we'll chat. If you think I'm letting an audience go, you don't know me. So we could talk about, I don't know if we're live or not, but one of the things that's totally out of order that I just love talking about, one day I decided to take over one of the pages of the Colorado NORML website, and I figured I would take over the hemp, the industrial hemp page, because I knew nothing about it. And I knew there were wackos out there saying, oh, hemp, man, it'll save the world. It's magic. Great, cool. Shit. And then I started researching it, and I realized that hemp is magic and can save the world. And not only is it not an overblown statement, but if anything, it's probably understated. Its value as a crop, as a food, as a fuel. You want to hear something really sick? We live in a country where our government will let us buy Chinese hemp and will not let us grow our own. I dare anyone, whether you can hear me out there or not, I dare anyone to tell me how that can make sense. You could say, oh, well, we could buy Canadian hemp instead. Well, we're Americans. Why do we buy Chinese hemp? It's just wrong. It's a crop that is not demanding. It replenishes soil. It doesn't need to be rotated. It's low moisture use. It's 8 times more efficient when used as a biofuel than corn, for example. Do you know why it is? I think of it this way. Anslinger had us so crazy in 1937 that he convinced the United States to ban rope. That's pretty, he really got us that crazy. Now, how did he get rope banned? As you probably know, William Randolph Hearst, our good friend that said, you bring me a war, I'll give you the headlines. Hearst was heavily involved with paper mills and was, of course, a huge newspaper publisher. He had a financial problem because hemp paper worked better. It was cheaper to make, it was commonly used, and no question, it was in direct competition with paper mills. So when he had the chance, he jumped in and got the next to zero THC cannabis sativa that we call industrial hemp, lumped in with marijuana, the devil's lettuce. So, how are we doing there technically? Do we think we're okay?
Yeah, we're fine. Just one user.
Thank you. Okay. Well, that user is a voter. We care about that user.
Yes, Linda.
Oh, Linda. We care about Linda. So, we have William Randolph Hearst jumping on with Anslinger on the bandwagon there to ban the devil's lettuce. And thankfully for all of us, they did, because nobody had smoked marijuana since 1937. It worked. The war on drugs, I'm happy to report, is an incredible success. Our children have no access to drugs. The market is well, Wait a minute. No, that's just horse shit. And you know it, and I know it. The fact is, and this is the LEAP point of view, which I heartily endorse, the war on drugs has failed, will never fail, will never succeed, can never succeed, and all it can do is claim more victims. One of the ways that I put it is we take something like a heroin addiction, a serious health problem. So we have our heroin addict, and then we say, by the way, in addition to your serious health problem, why don't we give you a felony or two? You can overcome an addiction, you can't overcome a conviction. We need to get the law out of these health issues. Let's continue to oversimplify, and I like oversimplifying when I'm right, because the oversimplifications are true. If your kid wants heroin, and they go to the neighborhood heroin dealer, are they going to get their proof of age checked? The government is not wonderful at doing a lot of things, and I'm not a fan of having them do much. But there are a couple of things the government really needs to do. One of them, to some extent, I think they need to regulate drugs and alcohol. They need to exclusively run prisons. The private prison system we have is truly an abomination. Do you know that I live near Fremont County, where you've heard of Supermax, where Supermax is located? And thanks in large part to the ongoing abysmal failure of the war on drugs, Fremont County is the largest penal colony on the planet. Doesn't it make you feel good to be an American? Let's think about marijuana and being an American. I understand here in New Jersey, you Americans are only allowed to grow 3 strains. I thought this is the land of Edison. The Edison that tried everything from burning hair to guitar strings of different gauges until he found the one that burned like a filament and said, oh, I discovered it. The government wasn't there saying, well, Thomas, yes, you can work on the light bulb, but you have to pick 3 things to try. Excuse me? As we know...
You keep going, I'm just going to hold a note up for 1 or 2 people are saying they can't hear. Don't read it because they can't hear it.
Okay, let me just make this, that should turn up the volume a little bit and see if we overload anyone.
I'm just telling people who can't hear that we have tested at various places around the country and everybody said this sounds perfect, so we're not sure why they can't hear. So there, they have it.
Okay, so we left Thomas Edison hanging somewhere in New Jersey. We have a plant that's been used medicinally, give or take, 5,000 years. There's some debate about whether it started in China, India. It very possibly, from my reading, started in both about the same time. The documentation on both goes back about the same 5,000 years. We have a plant that consists of in excess of 80 identified cannabinoids. And when they talk about a strain, they're talking about a flavor that has a different mix of cannabinoids. And different terpenes. Oh, terpene, isn't that a great word? It's what makes it smell. That's all it is, but it's a great word anyway. So, if you have 80 or more ingredients involved in ways that we don't understand well yet, and we know the number of combinations we're dealing with is rather large, for a government to come in and say, pick 3. It's irrational. It's sick. For people that happen to medically need a different variety, it's cruel. You're in pain. Oh, I'm sorry. After you see your doctor for a year, what if they said that to you and you needed chemo? Well, you can have chemo after you've worked with your chemo doctor for a year, so we can say it's a bona fide relationship. How would you ever form a bona fide relationship with an ER doc? I'm sorry, ma'am, I realize your leg's cut off and you're gushing blood out of your femoral artery there, but I've only known you 5 minutes. I can't put a tourniquet on that. We need a bona fide relationship here. On the other hand, the tourniquet could cause the loss of the leg, and as we all know, and I'll say it again and I'll keep saying it, how many people has marijuana killed in the history of humans consuming marijuana? The number remains the same, 0. Now, don't let them fool you. When they say, oh, marijuana is involved in a large percentage of fatal traffic accidents. Bad news. On the one hand, there is some truth to that. But when you ask them the next question, when you found marijuana, how often did you find something else, whether it was a painkiller, whether it was a benzo, whether it was most typically alcohol? And the answer is, oh, every time, just about every time. And as an aside, for the conscientious consumer, whether you're in Colorado consuming because you damn well want to, or whether you're consuming medically, as far as the impairing effects, a little bit of marijuana might not impair you. A little bit of alcohol might not either, but together they really work wonderfully if what you want to do is watch Captain Kangaroo and smoke cigarettes. So if you're going to mix them, then you don't want to drive. Plug for our new app, Check Plus Balance, later. Oh, glad I looked at my notes. I talk in loops, except every once in a while I get stuck at the top of one of those loops and have to figure out which one I'm coming down the other side of. It's kind of interesting. When I left Colorado this morning, we've had medical marijuana since the year 2000. This year we have legal recreational marijuana, and as I flew out of Denver, I looked behind me and I watched, it was very strange. It was the most amazing CG I've ever seen, where the entire city of Denver collapsed into a giant hole. The moon did not come up last night. None of the crops grew. Nothing was stocked on the store shelves, and the state has vanished. It really, we all died because of marijuana. Or, in fact, nothing changed. Some people are in a different business. Our government is maybe a touch less plagued by financial problems than certainly the city of Detroit this week. But did the sky fall in? No. But think of the position, the difference in what we have going for us. We have a governor, Governor Hickenlooper, who before the election on Amendment 64 to legalize casual marijuana said, I'm against it. Didn't make a huge deal about it, just said, I'm against it. And there were different theories. He's a tavern owner and makes beer and he's afraid of the competition, and I don't believe a word of it. I just think he wasn't in favor of it. The day after the election, his statement was, I can see how that election came out. No problem. He put together a task force to advise the legislature and the governor's office on what they needed to do to make this work. He had NORML, he met with Colorado NORML. We walked into his chief counsel's office and Jack Finlaw said, first thing he said, oh, you guys are Colorado NORML, yeah, we have a seat for you. We have a seat for you at the table. Now, we came in there with 12 different ways to figure out how to beg to get a seat at the table. And Jack said something else at that meeting. He said, the governor's position is very simple. Voters have spoken, he's going to make this work. And from what I have seen, while on the one hand, yes, there are problems. Yes, there are insanely and sickly overzealous enforcers of codes in some locales more than in others. On the other hand, for the most part, patients are getting their medicine. They're getting top quality. Nobody's telling them, oh. And you'll see where all this ties together with the sad, sick conclusion that I don't think the New Jersey medical marijuana law is fixable. I don't think it can be fixed. But I just keep coming back to, having read it, I keep coming back to these pieces of it that just make me cringe. One of the things that we get to do, being Americans out in Colorado, is be inventive. And people are out there in their kitchens cooking away, coming up with candy, ice cream, whipped cream, foam, THC, high CBD delight for your back's pleasure. And if people don't like that, they'll come out with it in wintergreen in candies. Now, Does that suggest the packaging issue to keep the children out of it? Well, duh, you'd do that with aspirins, which by the way killed about 1,000 people in the United States last year. If you include the other NSAIDs with the aspirins, 1,000 last year, 1 year, aspirins, marijuana, 0. I told you I'd keep saying that. So we have people out there experimenting and coming up with amazing things. Some people, I'm making up a person, except I know these people exist, I've met them. Person is fighting cancer. They're taking chemo, and the marijuana helps them with their appetite, it helps them with their nausea control. Classic, straightforward. Even some of the cruelest anti-marijuana people acknowledge that that's a situation where I would, yes, that would be okay. If they were sick for a year. If they were sick for a year, that would be okay. Do you think perhaps some of those people who have never smoked really don't want to start smoking now? Now, I could say, well, the science is that it appears that long-term heavy marijuana smoking does not negatively impact your lungs. There's some research that says maybe it positively impacts them. Forget about that. What if somebody just thinks smoking is a bad idea? Who's the government to say, well, that's how you have to take that drug? That would be like saying, here's your aspirin, but you can only take it injectably. You can't take any tablets. You have to inject. What? This is crazy stuff. On the one hand, since all the politicians care about are votes, you got some votes, you got somebody, it sponsored a bill, it counts as a state with medical marijuana, it moved the ball forward, that matters. That's good stuff. The real question is, what next? We have some specific issues dealing with some specific, sadly famous 2-year-olds whose moms I'm honored to have with us today. And that's the letters for, numeral 4, Vivian.org. We also have a rather famous patient with us today, and because of medical privacy, I think it would be rude for me to say more than that. My understanding is patients in New Jersey can't get medicine, and when they can get it, it stinks. I'll catch crap later for harping on the subject, but frankly, we're Americans, and if we want to grow good pot, we grow good pot. And I can tell you, coming from Colorado, we grow good pot. It's not a problem. If you can't figure out how to do it in New Jersey, we can grow more than we need. Be happy to sell it to you once the states can work out their differences. So the state of Colorado has now collapsed because we've had medical for 13 years. The average age of patient for male is like 40. The average age of female patients, 43. Are there 20-year-old stoners with phony skateboard injuries and $40 fake doctor's letters because they want to smoke pot? Absolutely. Of course. Are there fewer than there would be if there were no government regulation? Well, yeah. Are there fewer people with access to pot who are one of the scare tactics? Well, we can't legalize it because then all the children will smoke it. Well, the usage of underage people in Colorado since medical became legalized has gone down and continues to go down. If you want to make money, I am told, this is anecdotal, if you want to make money in a middle school, go into the business of selling cigarettes or something where the government's on your side. But don't sell drugs. Kids can get the drugs. So, to the extent that the Jersey law is on the books, obviously it would make no sense to walk away from it. It would make no sense to abandon it. But what creates concern on my part is that to the extent that it's ultimately maybe not fixable, and whether that means a better medical bill or legalization, which is really determined by what you can get through. For now, it's what you've got, and I think you need to continue to push and do what can be done to force people to make it work. One of the things that I got to see out in Colorado was, at least my perspective on why what we did worked. I spoke to Mason Tvert, who is, if I had to pick one central guy who got the thing A64 passed in Colorado, it'd probably be Mason. Couldn't have done it alone. He, a number of years ago, ran this concept by me, safer. He said, I'm going to go and legalize marijuana because we all know it's safer than alcohol. I've apologized to him for my opinion. My opinion at the time was, great, Mason, you're out of your mind. Obviously, you're factually correct. That's never helped us. And this can't gain traction. This won't work. I am so happy to say I was entirely wrong. That was the heart of what created A64. Now, one of the things that Mason did, one of the things the organizations did, and one of the things that I believe you guys have to do, Marijuana Policy Project did not win the election alone. DPP, Drug Policy Project, L.E.A.P, NORML, nobody won it alone. We did win it by working together. What does working together mean? It means, for example, everybody doesn't get what they want. It means people get to be less pure ideologically. Sorry. Politics is ugly, it's filled with compromise, and it's annoying, and then you first get involved in it and it really gets bad. There's no other way to legalize it other than through the system. We can continue underground. None of us would be here tonight if our goal was to continue an underground world. For years I had heard the word marginalized. All right, marginalized, great. I never had a clue what it meant until one day, about a month after A64 passed, and I was just sitting there and thought, you know, damn, I realize it now. I have been marginalized. How cool is that? I've been marginalized. And I no longer am, because now it's legal. And I can tell you, it feels different. It feels different, and I've spoken to a lot of people about this. It feels different to the consumers, and it feels different to the non-consumers around them. People look at it differently. I'm not saying they should or they shouldn't, but they look at it differently. And another thing that my wife and I have noticed, and she's a complete non-smoker, so just a different point of view, not her thing. We tried to figure out who we knew that, going back to 2000, somebody who had previously not been a smoker, and then once it became relatively easily available medically, if that's what your goal is, how many people went out and began to smoke, became smokers? We could not think of one person. Between us, we thought of a single person that came out from another state to experiment. And after 2 tokes, lying there comfortably on the floor with a big grin, obviously happy, healthy, and I checked pulse and respiration anyway because you do that, but happy. I said, how you doing? He said, well, I don't know, but this sure shouldn't be a felony. And then he went back to sleep. He didn't drive off a cliff. He didn't beat his wife. You know what marijuana people, I've been doing criminal defense for 37 years. You know what marijuana people do when they get stopped? They apologize, they confess. They're disappointed, and they're confused why the officer doesn't want to just share their weed with them. You know why I'm not laughing? I've heard the story too many times. It's true. In general, it really is not a good idea to confess. And for those of my friends in Colorado, your cards are not good outside of Colorado. Your weed is illegal as hell outside of Colorado, and we don't have reciprocity. It's one of the ways in which our law didn't follow through the way it should. We don't have PTSD. That's embarrassing. That's just, And what makes it more embarrassing is this. I'm sitting here telling you that one of the reasons we won is because these organizations, which included veterans organizations, conspired, collaborated, talked to each other. We had scheduled phone conferences. The stuff's free now. We get on once a week with a phone conference. Two organizations didn't end up planning an event on the same day. Sometimes it was that simple. Sometimes it was as simple as Mason saying, you know, if you could hold off a day, I have a big deal news release set for tomorrow. Okay, that simple. In the earlier stages particularly, and continuing right on through, the vets made an unbelievably touching showing and contribution to moving the ball forward. When you see people who have served over 5 wars, I think we had. We were going back to World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq, Iran, pick a few others, all represented. Some not in very good shape. Can you look those people in the eyes and say, you know, you say this marijuana is good medicine for you, but I know better. I think it's not good for you. Pardon me? Here's my theory. If somebody smokes pot and claims it makes them feel happier, and we look at them objectively and decide they're not behaving manically, isn't that what being happier means? Isn't that the definition? How can you tell someone, no, you're not happy? You may think you're happy. You're really not. You're really very unhappy. Damn, and I thought I was happy. Huh. Could have fooled me. And I think it was Jocelyn Elders during one of our earlier campaigns was on TV, speaking of being happy. She was happy to inform us on a television ad that marijuana has been proven to be bad for, quote, and I believe it was Jocelyn, if I have the wrong Surgeon General, I apologize, been proven bad for every organ in the body. That's atomic, man! Every organ in the body. It's like a nuclear device went off. You're incinerated. That's some good pot. Even in Colorado, I'd be impressed. The vets are out there. We talked about L.E.A.P, NORML, SSDP. Who the hell heard of SSDP until I was becoming more active, and all of a sudden they're everywhere, and they're getting stuff done, and they're students for sensible drug policy. They're on the campuses. They're active as hell. They're energized. When I would do a L.E.A.P presentation for SSDP, these young people would be out there plastering leaflets by the hundreds on walls, and they filled auditoriums. Why does all that matter? You know, they tell us if you want to understand something, follow the money, and it's really a wise thing, and it's true. Well, in this case, for political change, follow the vote. It doesn't matter what they say. What they will do is what they think they need to do to win. Right now, Obama lied by saying he supported medical marijuana and helped get him elected. I'm embarrassed to say I voted for him. Disingenuous that he is. He does have positive traits. Frankly, I think the fact that we elected a man of color is a wonderful thing, which made a stupendously great statement to the rest of the world. We don't just elect old white guys. I like that part, that's great. Problem is his politics and his honesty.
Just L.E.A.P stuff.
I'm being handed Ziplocs or something. The Jersey audience is rough.
Oh, those are badges.
Oh, excellent, thank you, yes.
Should we take a 1 minute sponsor break here for Ralph?
Yes. And while we take the sponsor break for Ralph, if you please pass these around. These are L.E.A.P badges. And L.E.A.P is at leap.cc.
L.E.A.P sent these to us to give out to everybody. They're one of our sponsors. And now I'm going to introduce here Ralph Tarnofsky. He owns Professional Audio Consultants here. And I'm going to tell you right off, he has been selling me all my sound systems and home theater stuff since 1980. And Jeff Catesia and James Sisler will vouch for how kick-ass my system is.
Oh, yeah.
Ralph?
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that, and I'm glad you're enjoying your deer still all these years. And I just wanted to say that I certainly believe in the cause and for all the right reasons. And I have my business here in Millburn for about 32 years now, and the reason it's here is to honor music and movies. That's, for me, what it's all been about for 40 years now. I just want to help my friends and clients listen to music and enjoy their movies the best way possible, and to that end, providing the right equipment installed properly from PAC. And if you want to find out more about what I do and the spinning of vinyl and the digital downloads, everything in between, check out my website at www.pac-nj.com and you can find out more. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of Lenny's speech.
Ralph, thanks again for hosting us. And if you happen to notice these two rather lovely speakers, if the room seems larger in the morning, don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It'll be okay.
How are you going to get those on the plane?
Leave it to me. I'll figure something.
I have a living room.
The irony that one of the things we had the benefit of was money. One of the things I learned is that it's hard to win elections without money. And I can tell you close enough what the numbers were. And I find this just fascinating. To win the A64 election, more or less, cost about $4 million. About $4 million to win. It cost about $350,000, $400,000 to lose. Now that says a couple of things. First, it puts you in the ballpark of something to at least think about what these numbers are. And you can't buy the TV spots that you'll have to buy to win. The polling data that we were being supplied. If somebody changed color ties, I swear they knew the next day that the polls were affected. And one of the biggest shocks in the whole thing was when we won, we beat the latest polling data by 3 or 4 points. And from what I learned, that science is now so exact, so precise, that when they come up with a number, you don't differ by 3 or 4 points. It doesn't happen. And we beat it by 3 or 4 points. I think part of the reason is a lot of people got into the privacy of the voting booth and thought, all right, let me think. Is this really something I'm concerned about? Yeah, I'd like to have the tax revenue. Have I ever been assaulted by anybody because they were smoking pot? No. I could go on. You all know what I'd be saying. My point is, it was about 54% at the end of the day. I understand the numbers in Jersey may be way better than that. What that tells me is those people are not pulling together as much as they need to. Easily said, a lot of our funding was reputed to be from out of state. Fact. A lot of the funding was from out of state. Okay? There are 49 other states. Take a hint. If you can't raise the funding in Jersey, go anywhere you can go. You know all the fundraising moves. It's a matter of doing them, and even more important, getting other people to do them so that you can be busy getting other people to do them. All of
Your
the
wife said improve your posture to move the dildo mic.
That was the wrong number.
Thank you, dear. I don't know about this live streaming
But
stuff.
she spelled it M-I-K-E, so I'm a little wondering here.
There, well, straightened out. I'm not blushing, it's the color of the light in the room. Part of the irony that strikes me is this. It seems to me that the legalization of marijuana is the ultimate Republican issue. Individual rights, individual responsibility, states' rights, fiscal responsibility, smaller government. Doesn't that sound Republican to you? That's the definition of Republican, unless you want to talk about Tea Party insanity, and even the Republicans are trying to push that stuff away.
Particularly the states' rights issue.
The states' rights
I
is-
thought that was gonna be a very interesting thing to see how that would line up.
The states' rights issue has lawyers on both sides, some that believe it's a disastrous route to take. Some of my friends from the South who have seen states' rights do very, very bad things to people of color. Other people, I tend emotionally to think states' rights matters. I remember learning in about second grade that we live in the great experiment. The whole idea of having a multitude of states is so that we can try a multitude of different ways of doing things. You want to copy our marijuana law? I'll send it to you in doc or whatever you want. You'll probably improve on it. It's a good starting point. I did not help write it, but a number of us can help you point to things that could be written better, although they really did quite a nice job. Oh, and some of the constitutional language. This is beautiful. The Constitution, where they talk about legalizing, set some limits on tax rates, and it includes language that says, whatever you do, at the end of the day, it can't be commercially unreasonable. Now, how American is that? I love that. That's capitalism at its best. People are concerned about big tobacco coming in. I don't see any way that big tobacco doesn't come in. That's what they do. And big pharma, of course, that's what they do. That's what their stockholders pay them to do. Take Colorado as an example. We have Budweiser. We also have more microbreweries than any state per capita in the country. I see a similar kind of financial model in the marijuana world where there may well be the Budweisers and then there'll be the microbrews. Now, I would come up with some slightly more innocuous names for some of the strains. I mean, Kamikaze Afghan Atomic blows your head off with one hit green. It's just, it politically is not the easiest sell. Something like Painkiller number 2 would be really good. Emergency Salve number 4. But AK-47? Oh. What are they thinking? What are they
How
thinking?
about Bud Light with a different connotation?
Bud Light. Oh. I like it. They probably thought of it too. So we're talking about cooperation. I believe you have at least one legislator that will sponsor a decent piece of legislation. You probably have more. They respond. They have methods of counting. For example, one handwritten letter might translate to 500 emails. One phone call might translate to 50 emails. And they have a formula. You know what translates to nothing? You don't reach out to them. That translates to 0. The emails count. They pay attention. When I resigned being a judge in the city of Lafayette some years ago because my boss tried to raise the penalty from a $100 fine for under an ounce at the time to a $1,000 1-year jail maximum. And I'd had enough of the part-time judging. It wasn't what I wanted to be when I grew up, learned what I could, and it was time to move on. So I used that as a really, really good time to resign. And when news of that went public, AP picked it up, everyone jumped. It was wonderful. The ACLU jumped on board and said the city council shouldn't be doing that. The city council backed down. They got rid of the proposed new ordinance. They said, if we ever start over again, we're starting from the beginning, not from the second vote, not from the third vote. We're gonna start over again because we don't have time for this. Well, that's all we were trying to tell them. You don't have time for this. There are problems in the world. This just isn't one of them. And one of the city employees, I think, cracked out a turn a little bit. They said, oh, if we bring this up again, we'll get like 3,000 emails. Well, what that told me is, damn, they got 3,000 emails on this thing. The point is the same, though. We can stand up and be heard. And what I heard from the non-smokers after the election, what excited them the most was not the idea that pot had been legalized, because it wasn't a terribly big deal to them either. It was fine that it was legalized, but that wasn't their cause. What did matter, though, was they felt for the first time that they could remember that they once again had a voice as a voter, that they had something to say that would be heard. From my point of view, we ended one war in Vietnam, we ended another one in Colorado, and now we're trying to limit the casualties that occur before the other side realizes we're not at war anymore. And the only way they're going to realize it is when they realize they're not going to get reelected with ridiculous platforms. For example, you take your core group of volunteers. You go on the internet, and it takes about 30 seconds now. It really works great. You have the phone numbers of every legislator in the state. What's your legislator's position on legalizing marijuana? You call everyone. You call and email everyone. I wanted you to know my position is in favor of legalizing marijuana. Do you think it matters if they get 1,000 calls a week? It does. It does. Their aides come to them and say, I don't know what the hell's going on out there, but they're screaming for legalization. You better do something, or you're not going to get elected again. And this is New Jersey. I hate to break it to you folks, but a lot of people live here. And a lot of them support our cause. And we have L.E.A.P, and we have NORML. Don't pick one. Join them all. L.E.A.P has speakers that are former judges, the former head of the New Jersey State Police undercover narcotics squad for 14 years is one of the top 2 guys in L.E.A.P. People that said, we were there, we were busting people. Won't work. Failed. Won't work. Legalize it all and regulate it. This is just a disaster. These groups will help. They have speakers in the state. Communicating across state lines is really pretty easy these days. Conference calling is free. Skyping, I mean, I don't have to tell you how to work the stuff, but it has to be worked. And one of the things I saw in Colorado, walking in one day, somebody had decided it was time for a telephone banking. Never did telephone banking before. The software they have for this now is unbelievable. You get a screen that gives you the name of the person. They live 1.06 miles to the nearest polling place. Here's the address of the polling place. Here's their dog's name, their cat's name. It's terrifying. And you sit down and you make phone calls. My point is, when one of the experts said we need phone banking on this issue this weekend, we had every phone on 3 floors filled with everyone from me for my couple hours to a lot of student age, younger student age people, ringing phones. And a lot of them would hang up, and a lot of them would say, I'm really glad you called, I had a question. If you haven't heard of this, try to remember it, write it down, send me an email. The Science of Marijuana by Iverson. It's very hard to defend something with no facts. And the one book that I found so far that seems to have the most intelligent, clear, understandable, comprehensive answers to things like, does it impair you, is it addictive, is it a gateway drug, all the stuff you really need to have some sense of to be effective. I like The Science of Marijuana by Iverson. There are a lot of others. If you want one, Mason, in fact, Paul Armentano and Mason Tvert have a book which I think is called Safer, which is a slightly less technical, but Science of Marijuana is not particularly technical. My point is, when somebody says to you, well, it's a gateway drug, you really want to be able to look them into the eye with some confidence and say, well, PubMed right now has 25,000 plus published studies, and that's just not true. The science is it's not a gateway drug. Interestingly, it is being used successfully to help people withdraw from alcohol and heroin addictions, so the gate may be swinging the other way. My point is, knowledge is power, shared knowledge is power, and that particular book happens to cover a lot of bases. One of the I promised I'd jump around, one of the single biggest concerns that I've heard, talking to the sheriff of Laramie, Wyoming, talking to the chief of police of Cheyenne, Wyoming, literally 10 feet over the border from the Gomorrah that is now Colorado. They're both concerned about one issue, impaired driving. That was their concern. Their concern was not, we're going to have a bunch of raving drug addicts. They're not fools. These are smart guys. One of them, the sheriff, has the classic Western sheriff's handlebar mustache, best you've ever seen. Real gentleman. They were concerned about driving. Is that a valid concern? Well, sort of. Sort of, yes. Can it be? Absolutely no question about it, marijuana can impair driving. Doesn't impair driving in every person who smokes it for the rest of their lives from their first hit. Well, yeah, shortly after it kills them from its toxic poison effect, it might do that. Because one particular fairly well-known THC researcher that's done a lot of government work was able to detect some active THC, albeit a very small number, 30 days out, she then made the claim that therefore that person was impaired 30 days out. That must have, once again, been some really good pot. It must have been California, because even Colorado pot's not that good. What are the numbers really? All right. Set edibles aside, the numbers are really different, they're less predictable, and in terms of driving safety, edibles much safer. Take before you go to sleep. You'll be fine when you wake up in the morning, most of the time. Every once in a while you'll wake up and take a second to realize that you're stoned. They're working on it, they're getting more consistent. If you're smoking or vaporizing, THC, which is the cannabinoid that is primarily the psychoactive cannabinoid, peaks in your blood so fast that the peak is hit at about the time you're done smoking the joint. Then it's down below 5 after an hour to 3 hours. An hour for a lot of people, and 3 hours for almost everybody. You'll be below 5 nanograms per milliliter of active THC in whole blood. So I'm not talking about the inactive carboxy in urine that's stored in fat cells for weeks or months, that's not psychoactive, that punishes people for off-the-job behavior. I'm not talking about that, just active. But that would be too simple. I could throw all those cool numbers out, but it'd still be too simple. I have to get the fancy words right. Counterclockwise hysteresis curve. Isn't that fun? I'd love to be able to say that. Counterclockwise hysteresis curve means that even though the active THC in the blood is peaked here, you have to go further out in time to get to the maximum impairment. They don't match. One of the tricky things, one of the medical challenges with THC is this. Docs like water-soluble medicine. They like water-soluble medicine because they can control the dosage, they can control the method of administration, and it behaves nicely in the body in fairly predictable ways, especially when compared to a lipid or fat-soluble drug like cannabis. Because it is fat-soluble, its behavior in the body is totally different. That's why you run into stuff like it being stored in the fat cells for weeks or months in the carboxy, written C-O-O-H. It's pronounced carboxy, and that's the inactive metabolite that Some states now have driving laws that say if your level of inactive metabolite is anything higher than 0, which means we know you smoked within the last couple of weeks or more, you're guilty of drunk driving. Okay, so now they've made criminals out of every patient in their states. We avoided that narrowly in Colorado. We had to beat it back 4 times. We beat it back 3 times, and then on the 4th time, we didn't lose badly. We at least had them looking at the right number. Let me be clear about that. We had them looking at active THC in whole blood as opposed to looking at the completely meaningless carboxymetabolite from urine. So at least they're looking in the right place. The problem is they're still looking at a number, and unlike water-soluble alcohol, where the impairment does generally correlate to the blood level, that is absolutely not true with THC. One person, picture this, a lightweight drunk. They're at an 0.3, 1 glass of wine, and they're trashed. That's not typical average reaction to that glass of wine. On the other hand, marijuana has a strong negative effect on some people. That was a brother joke. Where was I here? You
Strong
succeeded in
negative effect
distracting
on
me.
some people.
Thank you. Picture this. Picture a drug where the number is just a number. It's nothing else. It's not an amount of impairment. Your height's your height, your weight's your weight, the amount of active THC in your blood is a number. It is not a measure of your impairment. One person might really be impaired at a not very big number, whereas somebody else might be unimpaired at a number that would really surprise you, and you say, well, that looks like a high number. Well, that's because we're used to a higher number meaning more of something. Well, in this case it does. It means there is a higher number. It means there's more measurable amount of THC in the blood. What it doesn't mean is that therefore there's more impairment. That's where the law doesn't track the facts. Now, when we look at impairment, keep in mind that there's a difference between impaired behavior. For example, your reaction time is slowed down. That sounds like impaired behavior. Then we have changed behavior. So the experienced smoker, knowing his or her reaction time maybe is slower, leaves extra following distance. So there's a compensatory behavior, a changed behavior, which in and of itself is a different behavior, but not a measure of impairment. Won't help you if somebody runs in the street in front of you, which is why you don't want to be driving impaired. Now I'll give you the plug for our new project. Our new project is an iPhone app, Check Plus Balance. And what my partner Mark Silverman and I are doing is measuring balance, reaction time, memory, and time perception. Applying the magic algorithms from a NASA scientist, literally what Mark's background includes, and coming up with a suggestion. So we can't tell you if you're impaired, but we can sure give you a better clue than, how do I feel? Or how many drinks have I had, and did I have 2 hits or 4 hits? The counting is all crap anyway. It doesn't tell you if you're impaired. So we can't guarantee, of course, that you'll be legal, but we can give you a good quick snapshot of your performance. And right now we're giving it away free. So Check Plus Balance, the links are there. Try it out, let us know your thoughts. So it can impair on the road. You mix in something else with it, it can seriously impair on the road. What does that mean? It means we need to be educated on the facts and also not out there being idiots. Which really means that when we pass on our knowledge to other people, we try to get them not to be idiots. It's a challenge. Some are easy. You make them president. Some are impossible. There were people during the election where, and there's a very small group of people, part of our task was, let's hope they're not heard, because if they're heard, it will harm us. Part of my approach, talking to somebody from a different organization, would be, absolutely understand your point, but at the end of the day, there's only one thing that matters: winning the election. You'll agree with me on that, right? Sure, it could be better. Not bad. Could be better. We have to win. And with that approach, we were able to keep people on board, and we were able to keep most people from going sideways. And even a few of my friends that took different directions didn't do it in a way that really was harmful to the movement the way that it could have been. There were bumps. It was exciting. It was very exciting. But my point is, with the underlying thinking being, join all the teams. Play together. You really can win. You really can do it. I think Edison tried 10,000 different things before he made the damn light bulb, and they called him an inventor. So you have to make 10,000 calls. Sorry.
That's because Mr. Blumke really made it. Inside joke. But true. My father had an engineer working for him who worked side by side with Edison. And he told us once that Edison was really smart, and one of the smartest things he did was have really smart engineers like Richard Blumke sitting next to him when he invented the light bulb. And what Mr. Blumke designed, with no college education at all, was these things, electron tubes, and they're the hardest thing on earth to design. That's what our dad used to make. Mr. Blumke worked with Thomas Edison.
I have noticed that, interestingly, Colorado is flourishing with glass blowers. We have some of the finest glass blowers I've seen in a long time, and they look like they used to be scientific glass blowers from the shapes that are coming out, but they all seem to be coming out to look a lot like pipes of various types to me now. So the glass blowing industry is getting a tremendous boost. Those artisans are getting a tremendous boost. Selling melted glass, being artists. Another one of the horrible side effects of legalizing marijuana. People are blowing glass. What'll they be blowing next? I didn't say that, dear.
Ray, how much longer do you need before we go to question and answer?
I can take questions
Well, I'm
anytime.
gonna change mic settings and we'll open up and I'll give you just one or two comments that came in over the internet. How much longer do you need for your overall stuff?
I think I'm in great shape. Let me scan my notes, check my
And
posture.
then I'm gonna set the microphone so everybody in the room can be heard really nicely.
I like throwing out factoids because some of them are so much fun. You all know the government, the federal government. I'm going to throw in a couple of factoids and then
Yeah, that's fine.
I do get enthused. The U.S. government holds a patent in the name of the U.S. government, who is holding it for, I believe, the Department of Human Services, for the use of a cannabinoid as an antioxidant. The U.S. government holds a U.S. federal patent for a medical use of a cannabinoid. What? What? Now, you'll recall this is the same federal government that considers marijuana Schedule I controlled substance, no recognized appropriate legal use. It's good for nothing, and in fact, it's just bad. It's the PCP of the drug world. Just bad. Oh, but we did have one little medical patent on it. The government also authorized 6 medical patients in the 60s, and I believe 4 of them are alive. One of them, Ed Rosenthal, quite famous as a patient, as an advocate. As an auction item one year, I bought one of his drug containers, sent to him courtesy of the U.S. government, with his 1 month supply of U.S. government supplied and rolled joints. The U.S. government thinks Mr. Rosenthal's appropriate 1 month dosage is just shy of a pound.
Yeah, baby.
A pound. Mr. Rosenthal's dosage is 10 joints a day, which is an ounce every 3 days. So I am exaggerating. I think it comes out a few grams under a pound.
I think it's 1 every 2 hours.
Okay. So the point is, when those same cops say, well, this couldn't have been for personal use, he had 3 ounces of pot. That couldn't have been for personal use. Yeah, and you don't hold the patent on a medical use either. Disingenuous person that I'm not going to vote for again. That's really the message.
But you can't vote for it.
There'll be other people to not vote for again. There'll be plenty of others to not vote for. And better, there'll be some to vote for. I'm not a fan of being a one-issue voter, but you sure can be a one-issue lobbyist. You sure can be hounding them about one issue, and they can sure think you're a one-issue voter. You can vote any way you want, but they should need to think you're a
So
one-issue
you're
voter.
sort of mad that he was disingenuous, that he should have been more forthcoming, or...
I did use the word disingenuous because it's a great word, and it's better than saying, the president just plain lied to us. It seems more elegant to say he was disingenuous. But the fact is, he just plain lied.
And that lie was?
The lie was when he came out and said that he wasn't going to interfere with medical marijuana as long as it was done consistently with state law. Utter lie. IRS, as we speak, is in Colorado taking down dispensary owners and going after them for back taxes based on tax law that was passed after their taxes were filed, and sticking them with $500,000 and $1 million tax bills and threats of tax fraud. On the other hand, the feds are picking on us less than they're picking on some others. Enough factoids for the moment.
Okay, I'm gonna put our microphone here into the surround mode, which will pick up the entire room. And I'm gonna give our sponsors one last plug to be very nice to them. Just so you know, when I'm talking about our sponsors here, NORML and L.E.A.P sponsored us between material, promotion, announcings on their websites. And then the Ralph obviously gave us this beautiful facility. Canna Savers, who is, it was described to me as, like if you're in Colorado, it's a big advantage. They're like the Groupon of cannabis. Our vaporizer company is Instant Karma Vaporizers. All the links are on our website, so everybody can check out our sponsors' websites. I might be off camera there. And then NORML and L.E.A.P in Colorado, NORML. And of course, you be happy too. We got to give our plug to Linda, who helps us out with all our website design. And at this point, let's turn it over for Lenny for open questions, and we'll start. I have 2 questions that came in over the internet, and I'll read both because they're kind of very semi-related, and it's possible they came in from the same person. So we'll start with, and let me just read them both. One of them says,
I see a short word in red.
I see it's all blonde, but that's just me.
What do you got?
Your recommendations for contacting voters through phone banking work great in a state that has referendum, unlike New Jersey. That's the first one. Let me read the second one. We should be focusing on pressuring the state commission on medical marijuana. Legislators don't care about calls or emails from people who don't live in their districts. We need to be efficient in our efforts.
Okay,
People only have so much time, energy, and money.
Okay, they're totally separate questions, so let me hear the first one again, please. Let me rephrase that. I have 2 totally separate answers for them. First, the referendum issue. I went to Rutgers Law School. I went to Colorado 6 weeks later. After I was out in Colorado for a while, I realized that you can amend the Constitution in Colorado more easily than I think any other state on the planet. My initial thinking was, that's pretty crazy. That's almost upsetting that you can amend the Constitution. It really empowers the people for better or worse. Colorado is also the center of home rule. Cities can have more power in Colorado than probably anywhere else in the country because it's a home rule state. That dictated the path of least resistance for us in Colorado. That meant in Colorado, the way to do it is constitutional referendum, amend the Constitution. That's the way to do it, so that's what we did. You have a different setup here. As I understand it, you're going to need someone to sponsor a bill, which means backing up just a little bit, you need to write a good bill. Step one, write a good bill. You can't go anywhere if you don't have a good bill written. Then you need a sponsor. You need somebody involved that's been through this process. I don't know this process. I know more about it in Colorado now than I did a few years ago. But that's because I was working with the people that understood it. I don't pretend to understand it. You need the people that understand it working with you, because they will tell you what to do and then you do it. So yes, the referendum is very different. The path here is different. You'll need your sponsor, but give them a better bill to run with and be able to back them. And when they're there arguing for it, be able to call the troops out wearing ties and jackets, because we all clean up pretty well, and it does matter at the State House. And the crowds do matter, and they do show on TV. Think of media as an upside-down funnel. We have this much news. We have this much media. So this much news is being sucked down into this giant media need. They need us feeding them more news as fast as we can in the top, or there's nothing left by the time you get to the bottom of the funnel. So the more we, as activists, can give them news, and what's news? It's anything we give them and tell them is news. We're holding a press conference. We're announcing the release of the first draft of the document, whatever it is. Create the news. You'll find some reporters will pick up on it and follow it because it has the word marijuana in it, and it makes for sexy newspaper writing. Work it. Yes?
You said do a good bill. I thought our bill originally was pretty decent, and then it got changed. Like, so how do we go with a good bill that just gets changed?
My experience in Colorado was the same. You start out with something. On the driving issue this year, we had it won again. It was dead. We had it won again. It sprung to life on, I think it was literally the last day of the session. It came to life and got passed. Fortunately, in a form that was not horrible. Yes. If you want to avoid frustration, find something else to do. Political activism is very bad if your tolerance for frustration is not good. My tolerance for frustration stinks. So for me to be political active is challenging, because that stuff happens and it's wrong, it's un-American, and it's exactly what happens, and all you can do is stay with it and keep fighting it, and you end up winning more than you would have. You end up with language that's better than it would have been, and it won't be what it's. You've all heard the old joke about making sausages and making laws. The difference is, if sausages were made as disgustingly as laws were made, we'd all be dead from eating the sausages. They're trying to kill us with the laws as is. The second question had to do with the second question, yes. So yes, the process is different. Yes, you have to tailor what you're doing to the New Jersey process.
We should be focusing on pressuring the state commission on medical marijuana. Legislators don't care about calls or emails from people who don't live in their districts. We need to be efficient in our efforts.
Let me speak to that. As far as the first
Let
part,
me just say, for anybody listening on live, if you want to send us a question and you haven't seen how, right above the video feed, you'll see a link there, and just click on that and you can send me questions live.
as far as out of district is concerned, there is not a person holding elective office, I venture to say, in the state of New Jersey that thinks that's the only elective office they will ever hold. They know it is not the only elective office they will ever hold. In fact, it's the lowest office they are currently holding, and that's the way they see it. They're currently in the lowest office they will ever hold, on their way to the next higher office. They want support, they want it from everywhere, and it absolutely counts if it's out of district. And thinking narrow, just focusing on one district and thinking they don't care beyond that, I respectfully 120% disagree. I couldn't disagree more. As far as a particular commission in New Jersey needing as much attention as can be focused on it, I suspect that the caller knows exactly what they're talking about, and they're probably right. but I can't speak to it specifically because I don't know the commission. So I'm not saying don't take that step. When somebody runs for city council, they want to be county commissioner next, and then they want to be the governor. And the governors all think they're the next president. Hickenlooper might be. But I don't think I need to belabor that more. That's my take on it anyway. Yes?
Well, since we're talking about New Jersey, and we have one of the most powerful governors, if not the most powerful, and I'm talking about by their power, not the individual who's governor right now, any governor in New Jersey. We had a situation where the previous governor before Christie wanted to see the law passed, signed it before he left office, and we've seen Christie, just take it and rip it to shreds, the compassionate marijuana law. And there's nobody, up until recently, that was getting anything. There's one dispensary in Montclair. The whole thing has been...
Right now, you're in the middle of a disaster. What I don't know are the specifics of the obstructionist actions that Christie has taken. And in legal language, I don't know if mandamus lies. If he's refusing to do a ministerial act, he's supposed to sign something, he just won't sign it. Then theoretically, you can sue him. I think, if my memory's right, and it's not the kind of law I practice, you can sue him directly in the New Jersey Supreme Court to force him to do his duty. Is he in that position? I don't know. Does he have future political aspirations? Yes. Did Pat Robertson come out and say he was in favor of legalizing marijuana because it was good for the family to have it legal? Yes. Are there people of color in the state of New Jersey? One of the things that I didn't get to is the racist aspect to the war on drugs. The effect on wealthy white kids is limited. They get busted for a joint in college, and it's very bad, and it can be disastrous. It can result in death in the extreme, but the result is more limited. On the other hand, you go into a ghetto of people of color, a poverty ghetto, people of color, they're disproportionately being busted for drug crimes like 7-to-1, disproportionately. So we're taking away the vote in some states by felonizing them. We're certainly not helping anybody's employment opportunities by giving them drug convictions. My point is, there are enough people motivated to end the war on drugs, and Christie wants to be president. He can't get elected president on 48% of the votes. Now I know it's very easy for me to fly in from Colorado and say that, and not live here for the next 2 to 5 years suffering through it every day. Did that in Colorado and don't want to do it again this week.
Do you have a guest room for all of us?
I think, not for you, but maybe for everyone.
In that sense, seems
I
that
know
Christie's
you're
suffering from the same problems that a lot of Republicans are, who seem to be in denial of the fact that because of their policies and programs, they're not getting elected to stuff, at least the highest office. And I think we're gonna have a continuous problem because he's kind of trying to run on this stuff. And he's been doing well.
I
but not
can't
because of this.
guarantee you can win. I can guarantee you will lose if you don't fight.
Well, that's-
Guaranteed.
I agree with that. 100%.
And I can guarantee we fought and we won. Now, I will tell you that when they announced that we had won the night of the election, we had a gathering and were waiting for the announcement. I still didn't believe that we had won, and sitting here today, I still don't really believe that we won. Still think it's a myth.
That joint we smoked at the courtyard of the hotel didn't convince you?
Go back to your computer.
I have another good question.
So we're all
whenever
going
you're
back
ready.
to the hotel later.
Ready for the next one.
It was in Boulder, we were legal.
Ready for the next one.
It seems as if the New Jersey State Department of Health is the one making all the regulations. They created the 3-strain limit, 10% THC, ban on edibles, ban on dispensary, home delivery, etc. None of this was in the original law. How can we restrict the DOH's power from adding further regulations, and how can we remove these restrictions? Thank you.
Well, I'm glad it's a nice, easy question.
And they said thank you.
You're welcome. The first thing that comes to mind is part of the team. You can't win without lawyers on the ground. It's the world we live in. You can't win without lawyers on the ground. You need lawyers helping you evaluate things, like, for example, are they complying with New Jersey law regarding regulatory agencies? The answer is probably not, because no one is. Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing according to their charge duty? Probably not. Can they be successfully sued? I have no idea, but my point is that's where the lawyers on the ground come in, to figure out which theories are viable, to figure out which may be long shots but get so much press that even though you lose in court, you got so much press that your governor is revealed more for what he really is. So you don't fight because you know you're going to win, you fight because you have to fight. Yes?
How do we approach a governor who refuses to see his constituents?
His aides are telling him how many calls he got and how many emails he got and how many people are out on the steps with signs every day. He can pull a U.S. government thing and just say nothing. Act casual, say nothing, and go ahead and do whatever they want. Because every time they say something, they just get in more trouble. Is he a problem? He's literally a huge problem. He's a disaster. He's a Nazi torturer. Anyone who would deny a patient medicine, I mean, what's more evil than denying a patient medicine that provides them with relief?
I'm going to give our, hopefully, national audience, I know we do have people in New Jersey, I've seen Colorado and Washington, D.C., I want to put my fingernails actually here on the internet for everybody to see. I suffer from psoriatic arthritis, which is the same autoimmune disease as psoriasis, and it feels like I'm getting toothpicks under my fingernails. Doctor said I can take opioids, the other camera too. I've never put an opioid in my body in my life. All my friends are dead of drug overdoses. I won't do it. I can take 4 Advil, which I can't take because the Humira I'm on is already going to kill my liver, and 2 hits of weed, pain in my fingernails is gone. But I don't qualify because our governor is practicing medicine, and personally, I think it's more of a Supreme Court issue in the state of New Jersey because he's withholding medicine from me that even though you guys can't get your medicine, at least you qualify. But our governor is looking at me and saying, well, I'm sorry, but I know a lot about medicine and you can't have it. You know, that's a Nazi thing, you know, saying other people can have the medicine, but we're withholding it from you.
I did get to accuse one judge of practicing medicine without a license for not letting my client medicate. The judge didn't think it was terribly funny. I told him that after I wrote it, I thought it sounded pretty good, and then I wasn't so sure a few days later. We ended up getting along fine. The case came out great. And maybe he is practicing medicine without a license. I don't know. I don't know how to go after Christie. I do know you need New Jersey lawyers on the ground. I believe that one of the areas of potential attack is going to be in the administrative law, the agency law, administrative law area. There are administrative procedure acts. There's a Uniform Administrative Procedures Act. All the things that tell agencies just how they're supposed to do stuff, how they're supposed to document it. We're doing some trick stuff in fighting DUI cases out in Colorado now with the equivalent of Freedom of Information Act requests. Very powerful tool. You need your Freedom of Information Act expert. We have our Colorado CORA, Open Records Act expert. That's been a powerful tool. Yes?
I have a comment and a question. Comment is, I've actually had some of that Mississippi weed in a can. It's absolutely horrible. It's like stems and seeds
I've
ground up.
wondered about that.
It's horrible.
He's saying the government weed was really horrible.
Absolutely bad. It's like they ground up the stems and seeds in it, and it just...
So if it was real marijuana, he might not have needed 10 joints a day.
It tasted really bad, too. It was just like headache weed.
Huh.
Yeah.
It can't be for lack of ability. They have some of the best growers on the planet in the federal prisons. And it's tragic that that's funny. I know it's funny, but it's
so
not.
I'm sure New Jersey's weed isn't going to be that much better, I'm afraid. But The question is, in New Jersey, we have the ability to smoke and medicate in our cars. I don't know if that's like that in Colorado, but in the law, we're allowed to medicate in our cars.
We have basically no open container, you have to carry it in the trunk.
Okay. The problem I'm seeing is that in New Jersey, you can get a DUI for just having your keys in your hand outside your car, or you could be asleep in your car with the keys in the pocket. You could be a passenger in the car and get a DUI in New Jersey. So I'm just wondering, is it going to get worse before it gets better in New Jersey with DUIs now? What should we expect?
Here's what's gonna get worse. What's going to get worse is the cops are gonna pay more attention, they're going to think they're smelling more weed than they are. They're going to think they smell weed every time you had an ounce in the trunk a month before. So more people will be stopped. I personally think there'll be a similar percentage of people driving stoned that there always were. And I'm not saying that's good, but I think there'll be a similar number. I don't think it'll change much. I think the enforcement will change. And I think the personal responsibility is as good as it gets. Make the best personal decisions you can make, which include don't drive if you're impaired. And then if you happen to be unlucky, you may have a problem anyway. But beyond being personally responsible, I'm not sure what else you can do unless you choose to just not smoke weed at all, and that's certainly an option. But being permitted to smoke in cars is rather strange. We'll give you crappy weed, but you can smoke it in your car. When I first moved to Colorado, one of the things that I used to talk about was I looked at the Colorado laws that were really, really terribly written. And after coming from Jersey, where many of the laws were really elegantly drafted, and I also saw that New Jersey had a legislature composed of a much higher percentage of lawyers. So my thinking was lawyers were doing a better job at just writing laws. I think it may have switched around. I think these days we may be doing a better job on some of our drafting, and that's too bad.
Do they need a warrant to get urine in Colorado, or can they just take urine from?
We're an express consent state, and what that means is you've given your consent if they have probable cause to arrest you because they think you're driving impaired by something. They can ask for blood test. If you refuse, you can lose your driving privileges for a year, 0 driving for a year, and it can be used against you in trial as evidence of guilt. He refused, must be guilty. But smoking, your law may say you can smoke in your car, but that is really rather dumb, to be blunt. To be blunt about the blunt. Yes.
I believe the law says we can smoke in our car as long as the car is not operational.
Right.
So
And as long as you don't get caught.
what I personally have done
Oh, so if you're in your garage in
is,
the car, it's okay.
I try not to medicate in my car when I'm alone. But I have somebody else who's driving, we pull the car over, they get out of the car, they're out of the car with the keys, I'm in the passenger seat or outside of the car. If it's inclement weather this winter, I medicate, we air out the car real well, and then we proceed, so that I'm not actually driving.
Yeah, smart.
What I've been suggesting to people in Colorado is that they carry their pot in one of these little fancy, expensive rubber seal lock boxes. And they're about $60 for the smaller ones. But they have rubber seals on them. They're waterproof, which means they tend to not leak, smell much. Stick a little lock on it. Leave the key in the trunk. You don't need to get to the key while you're driving. So then you're in the passenger compartment, and not only do you not have access to it, you don't even have the key on you. You can't get to the key without stopping the car, pulling over, getting out, and opening the trunk. Building a better defense in advance, perhaps? Perfect? No. But again, a lot of us have been paying a lot of attention for a lot of years, and it's become second nature, and sadly, I think that continues.
What would you suggest we do when pulled over? Because I have seen videos.
That's a separate lecture, but let me give you the short answer.
Okay.
The short answer is, If you're gonna have a discussion, that's what lawyers are for. Officer, I'd be happy to talk to you, please arrange it through my lawyer. They want your license and registration, you're gonna give it to them. If you get into a discussion about what you did or didn't do, you will lose. They are trained to have those discussions, that's all they do all day. You're not. Let's take last question.
Okay, isn't it a controversy in the law for them to arrest you for a Schedule I drug when they legalized it for medical purposes January 2010? And we also all know that it's a big pharmaceutical payoff that marijuana is not legal because they don't make money by getting us well. They like to keep us
I think exactly the opposite. I think big pharmacy is going to be huge in the marijuana business.
Okay.
They're not making money keeping it illegal, they make money making it legal. They want to sell all the drugs, not just some of the drugs. So I disagree with you on that. I think their interest is precisely the opposite. And then the first part of the question,
Anybody else remember?
oh, I
Okay,
figured
no,
out
it
the
was
trick
Schedule
with,
One.
the
Yeah.
trick with short-term memory is
Yeah.
really easy.
They came back
Wait
with-
5 minutes.
Yeah, that's it.
How can you
It only took
pass
me
a
to-
law saying that there's medicinal value and that's a newer law, and then arrest somebody on the
Schedule
older
One,
law?
it's a contradiction,
Yeah,
can
it's
it
a
be thrown out?
contradiction. Doesn't
We're
the
still
newer law
scheduled-
supersede the older law?
I don't think there's a simple answer for that. In Colorado, I know the governor's office was specifically working on going through every criminal law on the books to figure out what they had to fix because of Amendment 64. And then they were gonna have an amendatory legislation. I don't know if that got through this year or not, I'm not sure. Thank you.
I have another internet question, which I think is worth it.
Okay.
There is currently a delay of implementation lawsuit against the Department of Health. Are you suggesting we should have multiple lawsuits? Thank you.
I'm suggesting you need New
This is
Jersey practicing lawyers on the ground to help guide you making in those decisions. You may be in a situation where one lawsuit with all your energy and resources is the way to go, and it may be one where you really need 50 lawsuits and 2 class actions. I don't know the answer. But that's the New Jersey lawyer on the ground part of the team. Everyone will know a little bit.
Have you ever worked with Drug Policy Alliance?
Of course, and I would put them on the list of mandatory joiners. In fact, DPA, I believe, was the large funder in Colorado. It was either DPA or marijuana policy. No, it was DPA, I think, was the big money in Colorado. Yeah, Nathan, what's Nathan's last name?
Edelman?
Thank you, Nathan Edelman. Yeah, powerful guy, great guy. Mover, shaker. And you know what? He'll take your phone call. Nathan, we're stuck. Can you give me an idea what we do next? He's not gonna say, I'm sorry, I'm busy today. He's not gonna do that. I really wanna thank you guys for coming tonight.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. I want to thank our sponsors. Thank you, sponsors. That was really wonderful of you. Ralph, thank you. You're a most gracious host.
You're welcome.
Daniel, nice job production. Appreciate it. And,
Can we do one more plug for Letters of Vivian?
sure.
And can I also ask, everyone who's signed in, I forgot postcards that I've been having.
Daniel
people
will
sign.
post it on the mmjnj.org website.
Okay.
He can put the link.
But,
But I was gonna ask, if you
yeah, she has a
sign,
sign-in sheet that if anybody wants to give her the information, she can get the information.
if just
out.
next to your name you put your zip code, what that'll do is that then I will assume that you're giving me permission to sign your name and zip code and send that to Governor Christie. And all it is the back of a postcard that says, please support Bill S2842.
And just for everyone's
Thank you.
information on this, it's very simple. A 2-year-old that suffers nonstop seizures except with proper medication, which happens to be marijuana, and then doesn't suffer nonstop seizures. How simple can it be? How simple can it be? What's our responsibility as an adult to give a 2-year-old medication to stop seizures? where do we even have a choice?
Mention the
There's
website again.
there's a 14-year-old who currently also has Dravet who's in the hospital now because the medications aren't holding him. Jackson. So his website is also, I'm not sure if it's on lettersforvivian.com, is www.jacksonstorms.com. I can give you that information and you can add it onto
Yep,
your
we'll post everything that we've learned on
website.
the
But
website.
yeah, this bill was written to help these two children get the medicine that they need without having to have more doctors than adults need. It helps adults because it lifts the 3-strain limit, and it also provides for those of us who don't want to smoke or vape that we can have an edible, or the kids can have an oil, which they can eat, or people who have a feeding tube can have something that can go into a feeding tube. That the possibilities are endless, and this bill can support that. The governor's turned it into pot for tots, which is a really awful way that the press has picked up on this. And so, yeah.
It sounds like Nancy Grace calling that woman in Florida constantly tot mom.
Exactly.
Used to drive me crazy.
So lettersforvivian.org supports everybody.
You've got your work cut out for you.
That's Letters for Vivian with the number 4. People should visit that website, Letters for Vivian. And is that .org, the Letters for Living?
If anything works, you can put the
It's all
number
of them.
4for.com.org. We bought them all.
Good.
That's the way we do things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Our family doctor, who's a biochemist and also a nutritionist and practices holistic medicine, recommended using marijuana with bubbling it through water versus vaporizing it. I was wondering if you had an opinion about which is healthier in terms of if you were smoking it through water pipe or vaporizing.
I'm not comfortable second guessing somebody that has those initials after their name. It's surprising to me. For those of you that may not know, the difference is when you smoke, there's combustion and the formation of 100+ additional chemicals. What you really want to do is carboxylate, I believe is the word, the THC. Because until carboxylated, the THC doesn't work. To carboxylate it, it needs to be heated, but not to the burning point. So you put it in a vaporizer and you kind of semi-toast it to get it carboxylated. It then works and you inhale the vapor, but you haven't added that extra 100+ products of combustion, which are all things that, although some of them may, carbon monoxide and the like, may have psychoactive effect, you don't need them.
Maybe he's talking about the cooling element.
So the cooling element sounds
cool
right,
vapor.
but it doesn't change the chemistry of
The cool
smoke.
vapor.
But it doesn't change the chemistry of smoke from combustion versus lower temperature vapor. So my instincts tell me, I think I'd rather see someone vaporize, but I'm guessing.
Couldn't they combine both?
Well, if you have a volcano and you turn it up high, you're pretty close on the edge there of whether you're burning or toasting.
Now
It's
he's
like
saying, how
burnt
about
toast.
the water pipe vaporizer?
Yeah, vaporizing and go through.
A vapor bomb.
Dabbing? I mean,
Yes.
what about dabbing? I mean, it's like
I just came from a show in Denver.
it's
We
like-
had
it's like
Colorado
vaporizing
NORML
for
had a
water.
panel. The entire show was on dabbing. There were 40 booths.
What's dabbing?
It's highly concentrated. It's like, yeah.
Basically, it was, as I understood it, it seemed to be taking the hash oil approach to the next level in terms of different ways of consuming a hash oil type
But
product.
you can vaporize it through a water bomb. Is the
Yeah,
idea. So-
and a lot of the methods
And just so you
involve-
know, our sponsor, the Instant Karma Vaporizer, their big thing is that this vaporizer is specifically for oils and wax. That's really their claim to fame, is specifically what they're for.
A number of the devices worked by taking, say, a tungsten cylinder on top of a pipe, heating it with a torch so that the piece of metal was so hot, when you put the dab on it, when it touched it, it instantly turned to vapor, which you would then be inhaling. That was a common theme that I saw. I think that's good for tonight.
As we're wrapping up here, Jeff and James are going to entertain us with music while everybody is sitting on their seats.